Hey guys, welcome to CastCast. Um, I know that I haven't streamed on Saturday, but I just want to welcome you all to the podcast. I think that this is going to be the regularly scheduled time. Um, More than likely five Eastern, 5 Eastern, and then 1 Pacific time. But yeah, this is when I think I'm going to be doing every game prediction besides Thursday night, of course. For the rest of the weeks of the season. I'll look into this week. I want to see what games I guess we have. I know that we have Bills Dolphins is kind of a big game. Even though it's an 11 o'clock game. We also have some other teams that are 0-3 that are 2 out of the 4 teams are going to be getting a win because 4 0-3 teams square up this weekend. Kind of some interesting matchups. We also have Baltimore and Cleveland, which I expect to be a kind of big game, kind of defining what's going to happen in that division. Um, and then looking at the remainder of the games, we have some divisional matchups with the Raiders against the Chargers. We have, I guess, interestingly enough, Dallas and New England could be an interesting matchup there, to be honest with you. Who knows if Bill Belichick will be able to make things hard on Dak, especially after their embarrassing loss last week against the Cardinals. Some games I really don't expect much from, even though they were expected to be big games. Kansas City and the New York Jets. I really don't expect it to be that much of a difficult game for Kansas City. Apparently, Taylor Swift's going to be at the game again. Yeah, it's in New York. She obviously lives there. Fun fact. And she's been kind of bringing the Swifties with her to root for, the Chiefs because she's dating him. But other than that, let's get to it. I'll be looking at, the injury report when I look at these games. Otherwise, first game of the week to look at, I guess, we might as well, talk about this first. The London game in Wembley Stadium. At least I think that's in London. I'm sorry. Let me clarify here. Okay, it is London. That's what I thought. I, sorry for anybody that is from London or Europe. I've never been, and I commonly, unless it's like, a big name thing, I'm gonna commonly, kind of second guess myself there. But looking at this game, our first London game, we got the Falcons, who just came off of a loss to the Lions last week on Sunday. Ritter really, got sacked a lot by the Lions, and it was evident even in their win against, my Packers, in that they've gotten a lot of sacks the last 2 games. I think that at the beginning of the year, the Lions were not really getting that many sacks on quarterbacks if you look at their first 2 games compared to their last 2. Jacksonville coming off a very kind of embarrassing loss to the Texans, obviously in their division. I honestly am just going to say that I think that this is going to be an easy game for the Falcons, given that they have a pretty good defense. AJ Terrell, if he's stuck to Calvin Ridley, I think can make it be very hard on the passing attack for the Jaguars, which I just don't think has been able to get going and is very inconsistent. And it doesn't seem like, and to me, who knows if the Texans, are going to, use that and they're going to be a contending team in that division, which is the weakest division in the oh hey Teddy Belcher. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you still go to games there, Teddy Belcher? But Yeah, kind of talking about this game. I think that, the Falcons, disappointing loss last week. And I fully think that they're gonna win. Um, I guess crazy thing about them is the Falcons don't really have, I guess, that great of an offense per here, but they have the eighth best defense. Their rushing attack is really good, and I kind of fully expect them to do really well. I think that Ritter last week just, he was under too much pressure and they couldn't get the run game going against, a stout Lions defense. So I really think, Bijan and Algier can, have a really good game. I think that, Mac Hollins has also been doing some, really good things, and I think that the Jaguars just kind of proved that they don't really have that much of a defense for it. Do you have Battle Toads? I can't say that I do. Sorry. But yeah, my prediction for this game is that Atlanta's going to win. I'm going to kind of hold back on, predicting scores, but tell me about Green Bay, but not the team. I guess we're between games essentially at this point. Green Bay, I mean, they, produce really good cheese. That isn't even really relating back to the team. I've been there like a few times. I really don't know too much about Green Bay. I'm not gonna lie. You can call me a fair weather fan, but it's like I'm mainly invested in Green Bay because of the team. I really don't know much else to say. A lot of cheese. Farming town. Even though it's the major city in Wisconsin, it isn't that big. Um, next to one of the Great Lakes, and mostly farmers, as well as you know a couple of a couple of colleges near Green Bay. I'm not talking about Madison, but otherwise I don't have much to say about them. um okay, I'm Teddy, I'm gonna move on to the next one, and I'll wait to answer any questions or respond to anything, as I'm gonna record my analysis for this next one. All right. Let me look at this. All right. Looking at both the Bills and the Dolphins and their injury report, I guess the big blow to the Bills, making it, which will make it eat. Okay, now analyzing the Bills Dolphins game, which is in Buffalo, the major thing that I guess I noticed right off the bat is that Jordan Poyer, with his knee injury, is not gonna play. They have a number of other guys on the injury report, but the only one of them that looks like, you know, and it doesn't look like any other players are going to miss the game. Tre'Davious White had vet rest, I guess, the whole week, and then he didn't practice Friday. And then the rest of them had, Reed Ferguson, I guess their lawn snapper, didn't practice and then had a full practice Friday. I don't think that would be, I mean, maybe it would be huge if on some crazy, crazy bad snap or something, if he wasn't playing or miscommunication, it could be bad, but more than likely he'll play. It's only a wrist injury. And everybody else, full practices with their injuries. They have Micah Hyde here, Leonard Floyd, Brian Bates, Teron Johnson, and Saron Neal. Yeah, but big blow to Poyer not playing. Like I personally feel like it's pretty bad. They're gonna have to play really safe, contain the deep ball, kind of like how the Patriots did against the Dolphins, even though they still ended up losing that game. They just the Bills are going to have to play, I mean, somewhat similar, I think, of a defense that the New England did in order to prevent the deep ball. Obviously, one scary thing is that the Dolphins, when they won last week, were able to run the ball exceptionally well. Yeah, Tua had, some really good yards and really good passing yards, but it was ultimately the run game of why they were able to just essentially just run by the Broncos last week because of the averages of all the players and all of that. And looking at, I guess, the injuries and who's going to play for the Dolphins, they do have Jalen Phillips, the linebacker. He is out with his oblique injury. And then you have, limited practice from Teron Armstead, which isn't that good. Salvan Ahmed, I think, having limited practice with a groin injury, may not be as bad as you may think. You know, some of these other guys, I guess Eli Apple had a neck injury. He doesn't look like he's going to be out. Tyler Croft back, full practice Friday. You know, Julian Hill an ankle, but he had full practice every day. Deshaun Elliott having an ankle and a groin injury where he was limited every single day this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think that, with Waddle returning and then Tyreek still having put up good numbers last week, I think that the Bills are going to have their hands full. And I mean, one thing that I guess I think about with their team is that they have, a pretty good pass rush on the Bills, but then you look at their secondary and it's like, yeah, they have Tre'Davious White, who is, their best corner, and obviously they rested all week, hoping that he's, fully charged to go up against the Dolphins this week. But these are two teams where they know each other well. Last year, the Dolphins did have kind of this, I wouldn't say the same attack, because it seems like it's it's better than, last year, this year. And they seem to be a lot more efficient with their points. But being that it's a division matchup, it's in Buffalo, those fans are definitely going to be loud. They're going to need to be if they're going to kind of slow down or disrupt the offense of the Dolphins. I think that, you could essentially have a shootout here, where the thing that I'll say is that if Josh Allen has any sort of turnovers like he's had this year that have essentially blown games and, made it so that they were incapable of winning those games, then I think it's going to be kind of a very tall task for the Bills to win. That is why I'm still going with the Dolphins, because they are really, really hot right now. And I just, I don't think that they're going to have any sort of too cockiness. I think that they're well coached. I think that their coach is a good, in a good mind. And he really knows what he has, how to use it, and to maximize the efficiency of it on the offensive side. And I mean, their defense isn't too bad either. They seem to be performing better than last year, because I mean the Lions, I think, are number one in the point differential. Like they have way more points scored than points against. Obviously, that's going to be somewhat skewed with 50 points scored, above the Broncos last week, but it's still pretty impressive, and they've looked seemingly invincible. Like I said, I'm not going to project a point total, but I do think that the Dolphins, have the chance to win this by 10. I think that, given the Bills have had kind of a rocky year, I think that it's safe to say 10 points. I would like to say that I think that the Dolphins are 10-point favorites in this game. Moving on to the next game, we have Minnesota at Carolina, two 0-3 teams. It is in Carolina, it is in Carolina at Bank of America Stadium. I really think that this is the Vikings game to win. The Bills really haven't shown me that much. You could say that they almost had a comeback against the Saints. They really didn't, do that much. And I mean, the Saints kind of had, the Saints kind of had, even last week, they had a rough go of it. I'm pretty sure, I mean, of course they've had, and I mean, they did score 27, against Seattle. But, I mean, the thing about the Vikings to me is they didn't really have too many turnovers last week in their loss against the Chargers. But then you look at it and it's like the bad decision making by the Vikings is what ultimately cost them the game, And I mean, obviously the Vikings have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, so it's like if the Panthers are going to win a game, this could be the game. I just think that they have a lack of talent on their team, on the offensive side of the ball, where they just don't have a guy at wide receiver. I think it's just ultimately what's gonna put us too low of a ceiling on their offense, and it's gonna make their rookie quarterback struggle a lot. But I guess I totally just remembered that. I think I don't even know. I guess if he's injured, we got to check the injury report. Honestly, so oh my goodness, they have a lot. They have a lot of injuries. So Bryce Young actually looks like he is going to play. He still has the ankle injury, but he was a full participant in every day of practice. Obviously, the one thing I will say about him and going up against the Vikings is that Danielle Hunter has been having kind of a resurgence in his career. And I think that, with that, you've got to kind of, you got to be able to protect Bryce Young. But, I know that they went up against the Saints and he was under a good number of duress. He was able to escape a couple of times with his legs because he is very athletic. But looking at the team here, let's see, they have a few questionables. They have Miles Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, and then Frank Louvu. Jonathan Mingo with a concussion, so I don't know. They might be be thinking that he's possibly going to play because he was limited in practice, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And, gosh, a good number of injuries here where it's like, but a lot of them are full practices, and limited practices where they don't have a game status type thing. Looking at the Vikings, you have Marcus Davenport, questionable, kind of a blow to their pass rush if he's not able to play, but he did have a full practice Friday, so I'm assuming he'll go. Garrett Bradbury, obviously, pretty bad. Their center with a back injury, and he's questionable. Lewis Cine with a hamstring. They say that he's out, kind of unfortunate, a second-year player there. Harrison Phillips and Harrison Smith, they both rested all week, but looking at the Vikings, they don't really have any injuries to me that it's like would, make them unable to beat the Vikings. Unable to beat the Panthers. Goodness, I'm sorry. I totally just blanked there. Beat themselves, which is what they've been doing. But regardless of that, I personally think that, yeah, we have a bunch of injuries, I guess, on the Panthers where it's like a number of guys are questionable. The thing about Bryce Young is if his ankle is kind of bugging him a little bit, he's going to be a little bit less mobile. And I mean, he's still pretty quick, but, you don't want to risk re-injury, to an ankle injury where it's like, could put him out several games if it gets really bad. But I am going to give this game to the Vikings. I think that looking at the safety, the fact that, Xavier Woods isn't playing on the Panthers, that veteran presence, that guy that, is going to hold over the top. I think it's going to be really bad. And I mean, teams still seemingly don't know how to handle Jefferson, and he's still getting a good number of yards, a game. And I definitely think that he can have a heyday because the Vikings know that if they lose here, they are ultimately, they're going to miss the playoffs, and it's going to look really bad against a Panthers team who has also been struggling, but for different reasons, and against a Panthers team that is really banged up. So this is their chance to go out and prove that they can actually win, handle a game, have minimal turnovers, and, get a win in Charlotte. So I am going to go Minnesota by 6 in this game. Because I do think the Panthers, having scored a good amount last week, that'll have given them a good confidence boost. But moving on to the next game, we have the other game of 0-3s. We have the Denver Broncos visiting the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, of course, in Chicago. It's interesting. They give this game to the Chicago Bears, but I honestly think that this is one of those games that's going to be really, really hard to predict because the Bears have obviously, unless they change something drastic, which I think that if they do, they can handle the Broncos because the Broncos defense is looking so very bad, and it's like, I feel like Fields, this could be a game for him if they finally decide that they need to change the offense to maybe more the way it was last year. I really do think that it's like, you have enough weapons. If you actually cater to Fields' strengths, which, it's hard to do it all in 1 week. Obviously, last week they played against Kansas City, but it's like, I personally think that it's like Chicago, has, I wouldn't say more reason to win than Denver. But Denver, it's like, you don't know how much, that kind of loss that they had last week is going to linger in their head, and, you could go either way, obviously obviously one other thing about this is that Denver's defense has already let up, a lot of yards, looking at this, it's almost 200 yards more than Chicago. They also have 8 more penalties than Chicago. So, this is a penalty riddled team just like last year. The points allowed by Denver is already a lot, and I mean, the only thing I see that's really going for, Denver here is that they get more sacks and they allow less sacks, you know. But I mean, gosh, it's crazy to think. Like, I mean, you're looking at this, and the last time these two teams meet, it was 16-14 in 2019, which was ages ago. So you can't really go by prior game history either. But I just personally feel like, at Soldier Field, maybe the crowd gets rowdy. Maybe they're like, this is our game to win. Like, oh man, we can try and, run the football a bit more, because I think the Bears do have, a good rushing attack. And I think that they just need to lean on that, because the Broncos' run defense, my goodness, that's all I'll say about it. And it's like, it's hard to fix that in 1 week. And it's like, the Bears, I think, could have, a decent running attack if they don't get, too far behind. I'm going to go, this is a crapshoot of a prediction, but I'm going to go Bears by 3 at Soldier Field. Moving on, we have Baltimore at Cleveland. And I'm not going to lie, I think that Cleveland is kind of, showing that they are the team to beat in this division. Their defense playing really well. Their offense is finally, clicking, a bit. And, last week, the Ravens, they lost to the Colts. And I mean, I'm looking at this, and it just looks like, even though Lamar Jackson has a 73% completion percentage, he's only got 2 touchdowns to 1 interception over 3 games already. And then you have, Deshaun Watson, finally, hopefully clicking a bit, where it's like he's got 63% completion percentage and 4 TDs to two interceptions. Unfortunately, obviously the Browns proved that they can win games without Chubb, which Watson's going to have to be that leader. And he was able to play last week without Chubb and able to do really well. And I think that Amari Cooper, has just always been a very reliable wide receiver, a good safety blanket, as well as, a decent big play threat, because he's got such good hands, and just does everything, pretty well. Wouldn't say a jack of all trades, because he's better than that. He's like a jack of all trades plus, because he because he does everything so well. And it's like, that's the kind of guy that it's like, if Watson is escaping, he's going to be able to find the open field, and it's going to be very hard on defenses. And not to say that Baltimore's defense is, bad, but goodness, the Browns right now have the number 1 overall defense. They don't allow much rushing. You have to beat them in the pass. But then the thing about that is that, they have a really good pass rush led by Myles Garrett. And, they have Zadarius Smith. And I mean, I'm about to go check the injury report right here. But I think that the Cleveland Browns, looking at this, let me see. They do say Deshaun Watson has a right shoulder injury, which is kind of bad, but I guess, even David Njoku has an arm and a face injury. That's interesting to me. I've never seen a face injury before, but he didn't practice all week and he's questionable. but I fully expect Deshaun Watson to be able to go, and no other glaring injuries here. And most of these players, only a couple had limited practice on Friday. Joel Bitonio, the guard, and then Kareem Hunt, the running back, that they obviously brought back in because of the injury to Chubb and his familiarity with the system. Looking at the Ravens, Bateman's out, Beckham's out. This is another thing that I've been noticing, is that they have a very injury plagued, team, the Ravens. And it's just, this is one reason why they really needed to pay Lamar, because he seemingly has to play hero ball, being the only star talent on the offense, type of thing, because he has no weapons. Odell Beckham with his ankle, Rashad with his hamstring, both ruled out. Even Marlon Humphrey is out, which they just don't have a guy to cover. They just don't have a guy to cover the top guy on the Browns. Browns and Amari Cooper, and who else here? They have Ronnie Stanley, still doubtful with his knee injury. Knee injuries are so bad for linemen. Looking at this, yeah, you even have Gus Edwards with a concussion, and he was a full practice all week, so I'm kind of expecting him to go. I don't think that they would, have him unless they thought that he was going to be able to pass, be a full participant in practice, unless he was going to pass. Kyle Hamilton, their young and up and coming safety, with a back injury. He had a full practice, questionable. But yeah, then even Justin Hill, questionable. So it's like, multiple injuries to a couple of wide receivers that are guaranteed out, and then a couple of running backs. It just doesn't look good. And even an ankle injury to their young center, Tyler Linderbaum, making him questionable. And it's just, this just looks like a very banged up team, So I fully expect the Browns to win this. They finally seem to be on pace to actually, win their division, because it just doesn't look like any other team in their division is as polished and playing as well as them in order to compete record-wise. I would say the Steelers, but they don't look as much of a sure thing, even though they beat the Browns. But it's like, it was due to the fact that Chubb got injured, and they still barely won that game. And it's like, when your game plan goes out the window because your star tailback, gets injured 4 carries in, it's just never a good thing. But with this game, I'm kind of expecting the Browns to not run away with it, but I'm gonna say Browns by 7. Moving on to the next game, we have Pittsburgh and Houston. Houston, I think, will have a harder time against, Pittsburgh's defense than they did last week against the Jaguar defense, because the Jaguar defense just gave up a lot of points, and I mean, obviously the offense didn't do very well on Jacksonville, but it was kind of a coming out party for Stroud, the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Or for the Texans, not the number 1 overall pick in the draft. I'm sorry. But he looks legit at this point. 4 TDs, 0 interceptions with 906 yards. You'd like the completion percentage to be a little bit higher than 64.5, but it's respectable. Well on his way to winning Rookie of the Year in my eyes at this point. But looking at their rushing attack as well, Singletary and Pierce both doing really, really well for this team, being a good support for Stroud. And, Nico Collins, proven he could be the guy, as well as Dell. doing really well. So they have, a couple of young guys at wide receiver for the Texans where it's like, maybe teams aren't going to know how to prepare for this. But the thing about the Steelers to me is that they, they are pretty bad in the rushing department. They're 30th in rush defense. And in passing, they are 18th, which seems, kind of bad. But I look at this Texans team and I think that this is their opportunity. They do give, the Steelers the favorite for this game, but I personally think that I think the Texans, I think that this is their time. I think that Kenny Pickett has had his struggles this year, 3 picks. They don't really have that much of a run game. I mean, their bell cow, Najee Harris, 35 attempts over 3 games, averaging, 12.5 a game or whatever. With 139 yards. I just think that that's, not where you want to be, especially with a struggling QB where he's not able to throw it, to that many. I do think George Pickens is kind of, proven that he, can be a threat in this league. Really fast, catches a lot, very elusive with his speed, But, from him, it's a sheer drop off from his 238 yards down to 119 from Calvin Austin. I personally think that, Freiermuth needs to become more of a, safety blanket for Pickett so that he's not throwing as many picks. And, you look at this and it's like 200 yards difference between their yards. Pittsburgh's has 890 and then Houston over with 1.1K. Not a lot of passing from Pittsburgh. Rushing yards is about the same, coincidentally. But, looking at this, Houston does allow more sacks. So, there's always the X factor of TJ Watt. But, I do really think that, like, Pittsburgh's allowed a lot of yards and that sort of thing. And it's like, I guess their third down efficiency is really good and, they have more sacks. But I actually think that, looking at this game is tough because we have Pittsburgh who, seemingly struggling QB, and then we have Houston where, Stroud is doing really well, but they don't want to give it to the Texans. I think I'm going to go with the Texans because it seems like Stroud has a really good head on his shoulders, great athlete as well, I'm actually going to go Texans by 4 in this game. Because I think that, with their win last week, a dominating win against a division opponent, who has, dominated them for years. I think that, the Texans are just only going to get better. And the fact that Stroud is already playing this well anyway is just a really good sign for them and their future. And I think that Pickett has struggled. I think that he can be good, but I think that he really needs to stop turning the ball over in order to, make that step towards being the bona fide leader of this team. But yeah, Texans by 4. Moving on, we have the Rams visiting Indianapolis. I personally think that the Rams easily win this game. I think the Colts, even though they won last week in overtime, it's kind of crazy to me that Minshew, played so well. After, obviously he's the backup. They drafted Richardson to be their future. Minshew is more of the system QB. Um, low turnover guy, game manager style QB, whereas Richardson has the upside, the ridiculous upside. But I think the Rams, they're obviously in a very tough division. Looking at this is kind of a must win for them. The Colts, if they lose this game, it's not going to be huge for them because their division is pretty rocky at this point. There's no distinguished team that's going to run away with the division, after 3 weeks, and they're already 2-1, which I think, you could say is surprising. Who knew if they were going to, bring it all together in 1 year, with how bad their year was last year. But it's interesting to me. They give this game, and I mean, goodness, they're actually, I don't know, they're given this game. It's really bizarre. They have negatives on both. What is the projection? They give this game to the Colts, interestingly enough, even though I think the Rams, goodness, they've had a resurgence this year and they have good youth, they have good veterans, and, they are doing really bad against the run, I guess, but, Jonathan Taylor is still not playing. He's still not playing, and you don't have that much of a rushing attack with the, not even 300 yards after 3 games for the Colts. Zach Moss leading the charge with 48 carries. Yeah, they're handing it off plenty, but 210 yards. And then, you do have Richardson, who has 13 carries for 75 and 3 touchdowns, but that's just because he's such a good athlete, And I think that, but let me look at this real quick. The injury report for both these teams. Ryan Kelly is out with a concussion still for the Colts. And then you also have Bernard Raymond and a tackle out with a concussion. Anthony Richardson was full practice, unspecified game status, whatever that is. But he's obviously gonna play. And I guess you look at some other injuries that they have. It's like DeForest Buckner, their star D tackle, groin and a back injury, didn't practice at all this week. Who knows if he's going to be ready to go, which could be really bad for the Colts, because I think that the Rams, I think that the Rams could easily, run the ball on the Colts if they don't have DeForest Buckner, because he's their stalwart, and you look at Williams, who has 142 yards and 3 touchdowns, who wasn't even the starting back at the beginning of the year. That's, it's pretty crazy to me. I think that, I also think that, Stafford has been throwing for a lot of yards. I think that, DeForest Buckner is also, that pass rush type that could get after, Stafford, who's obviously not immobile, but is an insanely mobile QB. And if Stafford has more, time, he's already been, zipping it to Puka Nacua, quite a bit, who's already got 338 yards over 3 games, 30 receptions. Tutu Atwell, who crazy has been kind of a sneaky big play threat for them, where he's got 246 yards and only 17 catches, But yeah, a lot of yards for, about half of what Puka has. But it seems like the Rams are doing well without Cooper Kupp, whom I'm assuming is still, I'm pretty sure they put him on injured reserve. And they did rest Aaron Donald all week, but I think they'll need Aaron Donald if they're gonna, give Anthony Richardson a hard time, because he does escape with his legs quite a bit. But yeah, not having your starting center because of the concussion being really bad. I do think that I'm going to give this game to the Rams. I think that the Rams win by 7 here. I think that with DeForest Buckner having, a double injury where he didn't practice all week, it's just it doesn't look good, for them to not have their star D lineman, against a guy like Stafford who is so accurate and reads the field, pretty well. Stafford is very good at, just completing passes and being a very intelligent game manager. But yeah, I'm gonna give the Rams, and I'm gonna say the Rams by 6 in this game. The next game we got is a NFC South matchup. It is Tampa Bay going up against New Orleans in the Superdome in New Orleans, obviously. Coming off their first loss of the season last week. Overall, the team struggling. Evans, doing everything he could. Win that game, having a good game, but just not being enough. New Orleans coming off their loss, against the Packers. I think that they're going to be kind of, bitter to where they're going to take it out on the Buccaneers. I fully expect the Saints to actually win this game. I think Baker's going to struggle. I think he's really going to have to, escape a lot, because the pass rush of the Saints is just, they're really, really good. It was one of the things of why, it wasn't even just the Packers, of why they won, why it was such a, insane comeback victory. But why but the fact that the Saints have one of the best defense, and a very, very well-rounded defense where it's like they don't give up, that much. They're very scrappy at every single position. Like their linebackers are good. They have a good pass rush with Cameron Jordan. And then even their DB core, led by Lattimore, who has, been playing like a Pro Bowl quarterback again this year. But I guess, let me check the injury report. I fully expect Derek Carr to go, to be honest with you. I mean, it was unfortunate that he went out. I guess he was limited in practice. The thing about it is that I feel like with their offense, even if they have why can't I remember his name? The backup, gosh, why can't I remember? Is it Jameson? It's Jameson Winston. I don't know why I was trying to. I thought Williams, and I'm like, no, I know it's not Williams. But Jameson Winston probably having practiced, a lot this week, and I think with the weapons that they have with Olave and Thomas, I think that it'll make it a lot easier for him to play in that offense, as well as getting Alvin Kamara back this week, which will make it easier on them. So it's like I think that with Alvin Kamara coming back, being fresh, I think that it's going to be too tough a task for Tampa Bay to win this game. And I mean, you have Jamel Dean out, Servokia Dennis out, Cansey out, Derek Pitts out, 2 corners, 2 DBs out of the game. And then even, Vita Vea with a pectoral injury where he only had a limited practice on Friday. Devin White, his foot injury, he did practice Thursday and Friday on a limited practice. I expect him to go because if they're missing him, like the Saints can just have a heyday running it or throwing it, you know, and looking at the Saints, they do have, some injuries and some people out, like Cesar Ruiz being out is bad. He's obviously with the concussion, he wasn't able to clear concussion protocol, which is unfortunate because he's a good guard. Paulson Adebo out with a hammy. Not their star corner, but most of their corners have been playing really, really scrappy. So kind of an unfortunate loss there, especially when you have such good chemistry in the defense so far. And then Jordan Howden out with a finger injury, but still all their main weapons intact. The main players on their defense that make their defense so good. I fully expect the Saints to win this and make it a statement win in Tampa against, a banged up Buccaneers team. And yeah, I think I'm going to predict Saints by 7, to be honest with you. I think that they handle the Buccaneers. And on a side note, obviously Jamal Williams was out on Sunday last week, who's their ground pound running back, and he had no injury designation this week. So I fully expect their run game to even be more bolstered by that. So yeah, Saints by 7 in Tampa Bay. Moving on, we have an undefeated team here in their matchup, which is Washington against Philadelphia. Their first matchup this year, and they're saying that the Eagles win this game by a landslide. But in these divisional games, the Commanders did lose last week. They didn't look very good at all. They really didn't, last week in their game. But Philadelphia seems to be finding themselves. And I think that, when you have a QB like Jalen Hurts, you really don't want him to get settled in the pocket. And I think that the Commanders, they really need to be able to force pressure with Josh Sweat and Chase Young in order to get Jalen Hurts off his kilter, because as it was proven even in the Super Bowl last year, if you make him have to scramble quickly, all game, or even for a couple quarters, it really punishes his ability to read downfield, which I think is his only weakness. Because if he can't actually run upfield, then it's just hard. It's hard for him to be able to, use his talent, and he struggles. The other thing about the Commanders to me is that they have a good rushing attack, but Philadelphia seemingly has an insane run D where it's like, where are you going to run the ball without somebody that's a capable tackler, coming at you? And I mean, obviously Brown and Smith on the Eagles are, a really good passing attack, and they can get you short, they can get you long. I still remember, a couple of weeks ago where the Eagles just were seemingly struggling the whole game, and then they finally got Devonta Smith on a deep route where he just essentially, was able to blow over the top of coverage for a free touchdown, And I do think that their rushing attack is really good. Like, they can slow down the pass rush of the Commanders, because DeAndre Swift has been having a great year. He's a great fit behind this dominant Eagles line. And that's the other thing, is that they have, arguably the best O-line in the league, like they did last year. And, they can hurt you plenty just running the ball with, over 400 yards already just from two players, DeAndre Swift and Jalen Hurts. And then, 640 passing yards. So very well balanced, well oiled offense for the Eagles. And the Commanders, you know, Curtis Samuel and Scary Terry leading the team. Scary Terry seems to be, kind of struggling to get it going this season. I know that he had, a good game against the Broncos in that comeback victory that they had a couple weeks ago against them. But other than that, Scary Terry hasn't been doing that much. And who knows if it's just Sam Howell not throwing a good ball, but he does have 5 picks. And I don't think anybody was really thinking that Sam Howell was going to prove it and be the guy, and make them think that, oh, we don't need to draft a QB. So I do think that the Eagles at home, the Commanders, it's by a huge margin, but I don't think that the Eagles run away with this game. I might be wrong, to be honest with you. But I do think that they have a convincing win of 10 points. But I think that it's going to be grittier than people are going to think. And it's going to be hard, for the Eagles. Because I think that the Commanders do have a really good D-line that can stack up pretty well against the O-line of the Eagles. Not necessarily win, but I do think that they're gonna have their opportunities in order to try and get Hurts, or maybe strip sack, or maybe force, pressure on him to where he can throw a pick, because he's looked far from perfect this year. But yeah, Eagles by 10. But with a division like this and a game where the Commanders, it could be a good, a huge upset win for them. But yeah, I'm going to say Eagles by 10. Moving on, we have an AFC matchup here. Cincinnati and Tennessee. They say Cincinnati's going to win. I don't see why not. I think Tennessee is, I wouldn't say overrated. I like Derrick Henry, but the fact of the matter is that the Titans, Tannehill, you just know what you're going to get with him, and he's only getting older and not going to be as good as running, And even Derrick Henry is having a rough season where he's only got 163 yards over 3 games. And, last week they were handled, the Titans in their game. But looking at this, I think that Burrow finally looked more himself. In the last game, they were finally able to do things. They still have Joe Mixon, who's a really good do-it-all running back. Chase Higgins. I personally feel like the Bengals can definitely run away with this game, because I think the Titans, I think that their defense is just not that great. I think that Burrow's going to pick them apart. And I don't think they have the pass rush to get to him, to be honest with you. I'm not going to say too much more. I think that, just talent-wise as well, that it's just, the Titans don't have the talent in order to keep up with the Bengals. And I'm gonna say Bengals by 13. Actually, my biggest margin this week. But yeah, Bengals by 13. I think that they're gonna kind of solidify that it was just a slow start. Burrow's injury was kind of holding them back, and But yeah, I think Bengals by 13 over the Titans in this game. Now moving on, we have the 4:00 games. We have the Raiders and the Chargers. We all know that Davante Adams is upset. There's rumors that he could get traded to any number of teams. They are giving this game to the Chargers, which doesn't surprise me. The Chargers coming off their win last week where, Herbert threw for a crap ton of yards. Keenan Allen had a day. the Raiders have a terrible, terrible defense. They're dead last in rushing, as well as, middle of the pack, 15th in the passing game. And, the Chargers obviously have the fourth best passing offense and are even without Eckler, they're 13th in the run game. Boasting the third best offense in the league. And Herbert looking well worth he was definitely worth the money. 6 touchdowns in 3 games, 939 yards, a near 75% completion percentage. Herbert really is the real deal. Eckler has missed some time, but even he's 16 attempts when he did play, 117 yards. And then Kelly with 40 attempts for 142 yards. And yeah, Keenan Allen got 402 yards over 2 games. Let's hope he stays healthy because he could have a really good year. The only thing about the Raiders that, I think even gives them contention in this game is the fact that they do have Davante Adams, who is still proven that he's still going to put up the big numbers, even with how disgruntled he probably is. And, maybe he can have a heyday on a defense of the Chargers that has been susceptible against the throw. And obviously the thing about this game that you have to think about is that, their last meeting, last year the Raiders won, type of thing, and it was 27-20, but the Chargers, I really just don't see, the Chargers, I think, are going to get after Garoppolo, and Garoppolo has not been playing well this year. 3 picks last week, and then even 3 in 2 other games that, this year. It's crazy because he's throwing, a 68% completion, and he's got 700 yards, but they don't have a run game that's been reliable. Jacobs signed, a 1-year thing, and he's only got 108 yards 3 games in. And then the next guy has 1 attempt for 34 yards, which, is kind of a funny stat. But yeah, Adams, 3 touchdowns in 3 games with 322 yards, and 25 receptions, proving he's still like the guy and the dog that, everybody knows him for. But yeah, the Chargers, in a division like theirs where there's a possibility for them to still win it because of the Raiders are struggling. Even the Chiefs don't look as good as they have been. They're the dignified, team to beat in the AFC. And I mean, obviously they're in the division with these 2 teams, but the Chargers, they're looking to kind of, make a name for themselves, eventually correct some things on defense because they've been the highest scoring offense. The last 3 years they've had the most points. But yeah, I'm gonna take the Chargers, and I'm gonna take the Chargers by 7 over the Raiders in this game. Moving on, we have New England and Dallas, which I mentioned earlier. I think that this could be an interesting game. I think that Belichick does a good job of, forcing QBs to make mistakes, and I'm not saying, Dak only has 1 pick on the year, obviously has 647 yards, but given the teams that they've played and the fact that they lost to the Cardinals last week, I think that they definitely should feel worried against a New England Patriots team that, runs the ball pretty well. This will be Zeke's return to, I guess, Dallas, which is kind of a fun thing, and you never know if he's going to start, doing really well, and then obviously Stevenson, their lead back, and the thing about Mac Jones to me is that I feel like if they're going to do passes, they're going to be doing short passes. They're going to be doing short passes to keep him safe from the pass rush. I don't think Belichick or O'Brien are going to be doing that much deep ball throwing against a team like Dallas, because they know that it's just, a strip sack away or one forced bad throw, and it's going to be game over for New England. They give New England, Dallas, sorry, a 7-point advantage in this game, which honestly is kind of what I would give them. But I do think that given that they were, ultimately butchered by the run last week, it kind of showed the weakness of Dallas. And I mean, maybe they thought the Cardinals weren't going to run, but the Cardinals are a way worse rushing attack than the Patriots are. And it is in Dallas, but I do think that you can knock the wind out of a team's home crowd by running the ball over and over again. But I am gonna, like I said, I think that this stat line is actually pretty good. I am gonna give Dallas the win and a win by 7, but I think that there is a shot that they get upset this week, because I think O'Brien's a smart coach or a smart coordinator. He's not gonna put his quarterback in unnecessary risk. I do think that the O-line for the Patriots, is pretty well coached, and they do a pretty good job of protecting Mac. And he's pretty smart. He doesn't run a lot, but he does know how to run and escape the pocket if he needs to and throw the ball away. Mac Jones is he's a pretty safe QB to have, and he's not necessarily going to throw a lot of picks. And the other thing about Dallas is that, the injury to Diggs, they looked like a different defense. So, could be an interesting game, and we could see if that injury really does affect them a lot down the line. But I still am going to say Dallas by 7, because I think that they're just, more of a star-studded team. And I just really don't want to bet against Micah Parsons. And I think it would be kind of crazy if they lost 2 weeks in a row. But I'm not saying it can't happen. But moving on, we have, another undefeated team in San Fran hosting the Arizona Cardinals. This is a game that I think is going to be really ugly for the Cardinals. They're not going to be able to come away with 2 weeks in a row against upsets against, the two top. I still think the Cowboys are a top NFC team. I just think that they're a little bit more vulnerable. But I think that, San Fran, it's a divisional game. And I think that San Fran is just too good. They're just too good, to just like discredit and say they'll lose to the Cardinals. I don't really want to talk about them too much. I am going to pull up the injury report here, just to see if there's anybody. So yeah, Dre Greenlaw had his injury last week. Bad loss if they do lose him. Debo didn't practice all week, type of thing. Shoulder, has an unspecified game status, but I think, or Ayuk has had a shoulder injury, and he was limited, Wednesday and Thursday, but he was full on Friday. And he's unspecified. I'm fully expecting him to play. Trent Williams is still unspecified, but they say he was resting, and he is obviously an older player and a great player at the tackle position with full practice. I fully expect him to play. And no injuries to their team or their main guys besides Debo is a little weird. Debo's a tough guy. I expect him to play. But obviously getting Ayuk back, and he was playing really well. You look at the Cardinals though, and it's, they have a couple of injuries. Josh Woods, Jonathan Ledbetter, are both out. James Conner apparently had a back injury, but he had a full practice the last couple days. I fully expect him to play. He's a tough cookie. And nobody else with like really glaring injuries. I guess Marquise Brown with a thumb injury is a little, kind of sketch. Will it affect his ability to catch the ball? Obviously, the thumb being, probably the most important, finger or, appendage on your hand to catching the ball. But yeah, I fully expect him to go. Limited practice the last couple days. But yeah, like I said, the Arizona Cardinals would probably still be hard pressed to win even completely healthy and having the same injuries on the Niners side. But it's like you've got CMC, Christian McCaffrey, you've got Ayuk, you've got Kittle, you've got even their fullback Juszczyk, like what do you do even when he's considered a weapon and he attends like all these meetings that they said, but I think that the Niners win this game by, I think that they win it by 17. I'm not even joking. I think that they run away with this game, at home against a division rival that, yeah, they came off a crazy win against what we thought was an unbeatable team in the Cowboys. But yeah, I'm gonna say Niners over the Cardinals by 17 points. Moving on, we move on to New York, where we have the New York Jets hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I said before, Kansas City has, I wouldn't say it's immense struggles, but they don't look like, a Super Bowl winning team. They don't look like a Super Bowl winning team. I'll just say it. But I do expect them to kind of handle the Jets. The Jets haven't moved on from Wilson. It's another game, of course, at home. I honestly think that it would help Wilson if he wasn't at home, because hearing the boos from your own fans that don't want you there anymore, it's just not a good thing. And I'm sure they're going to boo him on Sunday because they really want to run him out of town. And, who knows how long it's going to take. Who knows how long it's going to take for him to either get his confidence back or for them to actually trade him. Not much to say here. I think the Jets, it's really bad. I mean, they were on Hard Knocks, and then they're having the Hard Knocks of the season where there's only a couple of teams I feel like in worse positions, like, the Broncos and the Bears are the only two teams I can really think of that it's like, man, these teams are having both, on the field issues as well as, potentially maybe the Jets not so much off the field, but it's like, when your fans are demanding for the release of Wilson or trade him, it's, it's not good. And I mean, even with the struggles of the Chiefs, you still have Mahomes with 7 TDs and 800 yards, only throwing 65%, which, is troubling, but, you trust Mahomes to do good things, and the Jets looking at Wilson averaging just above 50%, and it's crazy, but Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, only accumulating for 200 yards in over 50 carries. It just isn't good. And Garrett Wilson, 165 yards and 2 TDs, but, all that chemistry that he would have formed with, Rodgers in the preseason, all that gone. And it's like, obviously, he was still able to win Rookie of the Year last year, but it wasn't, a great and outstanding Rookie of the Year in the class that it was last year and how everyone performed. But yeah, I expect the Chiefs to win this game, and I'm gonna say Chiefs. I'm going to say Chiefs actually by 14, 2 touchdowns in this game, because I just don't think that. I think that things are probably only going to get worse for the Jets unless something changes with Zach Wilson. But until I see it, I don't believe it. And I think that Chris Jones is going to get after Zach Wilson quite a bit this game, because the O-line for the Jets is, suspect. Moving on to the next game in the final week of the game, we have on Monday night, we have Seattle visiting the New York Jets, another New York Jets game. Or another New York game, I'm sorry. New York Jets, sorry. But yeah, this game, I personally feel like, the Seahawks, they've finally kind of found their legs. Week 1 to me was kind of, maybe it was a shock to their system, and the fact that the Rams, they were quiet all off season. I don't think anybody thought that the Rams were going to be, coming in as hot as they were after their abysmal season last year, even though, they were injury plagued so much last year. But, looking at this, I think that we have a Seattle team that goes in and they beat the Giants into bowl. I think that, Geno Smith is doing, pretty well. Not a crazy amount of yards, but 4 TDs to 1 pick with pretty much 69% completion percentage with 68.9%. Kenneth Walker's having is obviously being quite a bell cow for them. Hopefully he can stay healthy, because he isn't necessarily a bigger guy, but 47 carries for 204 yards and 4 TDs. I mean, guys like this that are able to find the end zone quite a bit, I don't mind that his average isn't, up to maybe what you would want it to be with that many rushes, a lot of hard running in there, but even their backup, Charbonnet, 16 attempts for 73 yards, that's crazy. And then, of course, you still have Metcalf and Lockett. And I think it's only a matter of time until Smith-Njigba starts to produce more. Because even Lockett only has 103 yards through 3 games, and then Metcalf has 234 yards. I think that they just need to figure out this passing game. Maybe they just, are trying too much for the big ball and that sort of thing. But, this rushing attack has promise, and then Geno Smith is game managing really well, which is essentially what he did last year as well. But looking at the Giants, Daniel Jones, has been kind of had a rough go of it early on. I don't think he's playing terribly, even though he has 4 picks and only 2 TDs. I think that, not having a running game is really, really bad for them. But looking at this, I think that the receivers for the Giants really need to step up, because like Waller and Slayton, their top guys. Slayton did really well last year, surprisingly. And they traded for Waller, so they have that guy that can stretch the fields, but nobody else is producing when Waller is. And I mean, I've been noticing him getting double teamed and teams trying to contain him a lot. So somebody needs to step up on that passing game. It is hard to play quarterback if you don't have anybody really to throw to and no running game to fall back on with the injury to Saquon. But looking at this, I expect Seattle to win. They say they're only going to win by 2. I just don't see that, especially with, how many weapons they have. I'm going to give Seattle the game, and I'm going to give them the game by 10. I think that they beat the Giants by 10 on Monday Night Football. I do want to open the floor for if you guys want to ask me or mention anything, or if you even if you disagree with what I'm saying. But But otherwise, if that's it, if no one's gonna ask me any questions, I think I'm gonna end the podcast there. And as always, go Pack Go. Unfortunate loss for my Packers on Thursday night, but I hope the best of luck to your teams, even if I predicted against them this weekend. And as always, I'm your host, Casty Streeter, and have a good rest of your weekend.